As many A's fans know, I've been banging the gavel on the con that John Fisher's been pulling, been running for months now. And I feel like I might be one of the only national voices kind of shouting into the abyss when the owners unanimously approved the A's to relocate to Las Vegas. There was mostly nothing from the national media. Sure, the local media in the Bay Area knew the con, and yes, they would speak out about John Fisher and company and how ridiculous this move was, how unfair it was. But I thought the national media completely dropped the ball, but they have been for a long time. And this convenient narrative that, well, the Raiders left and the Warriors left, and so thus it must be an Oakland problem, is the problem. And this is my reasoning behind why I believe this has happened, that the narrative has been completely butchered and held hostage and manipulated. Baseball itself does not command the national media's attention like football and basketball. And so thus, movements, maneuvering, posturing around baseball, fan bases that lose a team, not seen in the same way because the national media is not as invested. You know, if the Browns were to move again to Baltimore, if the Colts were to move again to Indianapolis, I think those things would resonate far deeper from a compassion level, from a sympathy level, an empathy level, from a national media that is more in tune with the sports they care about or they cover, they talk about every day. Baseball's just out there on an island. And so that hurts this from, I think, really sinking your teeth into it. The second thing is, not only is baseball out in the proverbial left field of most national media's purview, but also John Fisher is so quiet, so silent, so anonymous that he hasn't become a villain. You know, Art Modell was a villain in 1995. He was a very bombastic owner. He was a talkative owner. He was a front-facing owner in the National Football League. Fisher's the opposite. We haven't heard him speak in 20 years nearly until he spoke the other day. And because of it, I don't think most national media knows what's going on or has paid attention at all. And so if you have to create a hot take, if you have to create a narrative, you have to create an opinion on this, it's, well, I know these two things, the Raiders left and the Warriors left. And so, well, yeah, nobody shows up to those games anyway, so they got to go to Vegas. And what that does is it's a slap in the face to the actual reality of what is happening, which that's the part that bothers me most. That John Fisher has been the single worst owner, arguably, not only in baseball, but certainly one of the worst in the four professional major sports here in America. And nobody knows who he is outside the Bay Area. He hasn't done an on-camera interview since buying the team before he announced the move this week. I mean, think about that. That A's fans could have gone 20 years nearly with him as the owner and never heard him speak. He's a coward. He hides, and in the middle of moving a team after 55 years in Oakland, he didn't even have the guts to explain why. The only interview he did was curated his answers for written space only, and the anchor had to then kind of replay through his own words, explain what Fisher said. So none of Fisher's quotes are allowed on camera. That to me was such an incredible slap in the face, such an embarrassment that Fisher could do this and baseball and Manfred couldn't even mandate him to explain to the fans why it was happening in his own words. And so all of these things lead to a national media that doesn't understand what happened, and they don't pay attention to these facts. When you hear it's Oakland's fault, blame Oakland. It must be something with Oakland. Take out of it all of these political narratives and leanings that are in this space. And let's start with the baseball. John Fisher never spent money on a free agent. Never. He never re-signed any of his own players. He allowed an outdated stadium to rot, erode, be totally decrepit, and then said, well, why aren't you showing up? There is a short differential, a small differential between what public money is there for the Howard Terminal Ballpark and what he could then close the gap on. And he refuses to close the gap, part of the phrase, and baseball refuses to do the same thing. When SoFi Stadium in LA had cost overruns, guess what the NFL did? The owners came together and said, well, we're going to give you a loan to make sure this goes through because we want the ballpark. We want the stadium in LA. It's good for brand. It's good for us in LA, blah, blah, blah. Major League Baseball could have said, hey, there's less than a $100 million differential here on a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar project. Let's give you the loan. Let's make sure this thing works. Let's get the windfall. Let's get the difference in here. Done. Closed. The gap closed. They didn't do that. Fisher didn't do that. And on top of it, as I said, never even went public to explain why his reasoning was. None of that is Oakland's fault. All of that is John Fisher's fault. And yet, what's the narrative? Blame Oakland. Stop blaming Oakland. You don't know what's going on out there. You don't care because you don't care about baseball. You don't know John Fisher. You don't know the A's, and you don't care. And that's why the narrative has been hijacked. That's why the con is on. Because the people with the loudest voices around the country don't inform themselves of what happened. John Fisher purposefully tanked the organization. He made no honest efforts to find a local ballpark. Even his directives in Vegas are vague. They are kind of like impossible to decipher, impossible to see what's real and what's not. It's been circuitous. It's been unfocused. It's been a murky at best in Vegas. That's who he is. No good faith effort to do the ballpark in the Bay Area. No good faith effort to build the fan base. No good faith effort to buy players or put a competitive team out there. And no good faith effort to explain why he had to move. Stop blaming Oakland. This is a John Fisher problem. He's the con man. Don't let him get away with this. Subscribe to this channel. Plenty more videos where this came from. This fight isn't over. It's only just begun.